And we are back. If you were just here with me streaming the daily mental prayer and you came back, awesome. I'm trying to do multiple videos a days now. Videos a day. And this is just one of my efforts to do that, to bring more good Catholic content to the internet. And we're going to talk about 10 Catholic quotes for Easter. And here's one from Pope St. Leo the Great. No other person was raised than he who had been crucified and died. Now, this quote puzzled me a little bit when I first read it. No other person was raised? Well, Lazarus was raised, right? And Jesus raised a lot of other people from the dead as well. Even Old Testament prophets had raised people from the dead. So no other person was raised. What exactly does that mean? And this is just my interpretation, but no other person was raised by their own power other than Jesus. You see, when Lazarus and other people were resurrected by Jesus, they were resurrected by the power of someone else, not by their own power. Jesus was and is the only person, human being, who rose himself. So I really thought that that was an interesting quote, and it took me a little while to kind of come to grips with it and figure out exactly what that meant. The second quote, number 2, not in any particular order here, is from St. John of Damascus, and it says, after his resurrection from the dead, he put aside all his passions, ruin, hunger, and thirst, sleep and fatigue, and the like. I really love this quote because it kind of brings home the fact that Jesus was completely and utterly changed. He was glorified. He didn't need to eat anymore, even though he ate to show the apostles that he had a real physical body. He didn't need to eat. He didn't get hungry. His body would never decay anymore. He wouldn't get any older than his glorified body presented him as. And not only that, as we read in the Bible, there are other effects of a glorified body that once we get to heaven, if we get to heaven, we'll all be able to enjoy, which is being able to go through physical objects. Jesus would walk through locked doors, being to travel vast distances very quickly. For example, when Jesus was at Emmaus and they had communion with him. He broke the bread and then he pretty much just disappeared. So we could speculate and say that we will have some of these effects happen to our body. We will have some of these abilities after our resurrection if we have been good and faithful servants. And I don't see why not, because God is and Jesus is really showing us the promise that he's given us with everything that he's done. Of course, we're not going to be exactly like Jesus, but we are going to have many benefits similar to him because he says he promises us these things. That's why I really liked that quote. We got another one here from St. Augustine. This quote says, what a tremendous favor grace has done us. We have neither seen nor touched, and we have believed. This is a similar quote to what Jesus says. I'm not sure which book. Is it Luke or Matthew? But he says, blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. And that's an interesting quote that I never really understood, but I guess you have to have more faith to believe and not physically see Jesus. See, for me, I had a prayer answered, kind of a miraculous thing happened to me, and it's really easy for me to believe. So maybe I'm not getting as many blessings and benefits as somebody who didn't need to have that happen to them in order to be converted to the faith. So I'm not sure exactly how it works, but definitely an interesting quote here from St. Augustine. Lots of these quotes are from the Catena Aurea by St. Thomas Aquinas, there's a great app called the Catena app, just like this word right here, Catena. I don't know if it's catena.com or Catena Bible, but there's an app and there's a website, and basically they break down almost each verse from the Bible and add quotes from other saints and scholars. So I get a lot of my quotes from there. Our next quote is from St. Thomas Aquinas, the Summa Theologica. And some people say Summa Theologia, some people say Summa Theologica. I mean, I don't know which one is right. I've seen both, but I prefer Theologica. And the quote is this: Christ rose early when the day was beginning to dawn, to denote that by his resurrection, he brought us to the light of glory. And again, one of my favorite quotes about Easter, because Jesus is really, he's not just rising so he can rise because he needs to rise. No, Jesus is rising because he's showing us what promise we have at the resurrection. He's also showing us that we will rise because he's saying, I did the baptism, I, suffered, and you have to carry a cross. But if you follow me, you will also rise like I rose. So that's pretty great. And the light of glory is that we all can rise. We all can get a glorified body and go to heaven and be at the new heaven and the new earth, thanks to Jesus Christ. Passion, death, and resurrection. And that is the glory that we will receive. And that is, that's awesome. Next quote here is from the book of Micah, chapter 7, verse 8. And my favorite translation of the Bible is the Douay-Rheims Bible, the Chandler version. You really can't get a hold of the original Douay-Rheims Bible version anymore. Most of them is the Chandler translation, which isn't really that much different. He just updated the language a little bit to make it more palatable when you read it. But love the Douay-Rheims Bible. Check it out if you haven't before. And this quote says, Rejoice not thou, my enemy, over me, because I am fallen. I shall arise. I love this quote so much. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. And eventually I'm going to be doing a mental prayer on this quote. This quote is excellent. Rejoice not thou, my enemy, over me, because I am fallen. And Jesus was fallen, and it, for all intents and purposes, it looked like he was done. It was over. Everything was ruined. He was tortured and murdered and buried. It was over. And some of the Jewish leaders were rejoicing about that fact. But it just, that wasn't really what happened. He arose and he showed them that, hey, I'm in control, I'm in charge, and what might seem like a victory is really your defeat in the long term. And we as Christians really have to think in the long term, especially in our day-to-day lives. Am I going to do this or am I going to do that? Am I going to watch a movie or am I going to read the Bible a little bit more? Am I going to get distracted by ABC, XYZ, or am I going to play a board game with my family? Am I going to, educate myself more about the faith, or am I going to do yada yada? So I really like this quote because it helps you to think in the long term. You might be defeated now, quote unquote, but you will win in the end if you follow Jesus and carry your cross like he asked. Next quote here is from Romans chapter 4, verse 25. Jesus was delivered up for our sins and rose again for our justification. Another great quote from St. Paul. Jesus was delivered up for our sins, and not in a way that is basically we're getting off scot-free. That's not what happened. It's more of in a way of basically somebody is the debtor. God is the debtor. We owe the debt of sin. Hey, we sinned and we have to pay for that. If you think of it in money terms, it's a lot easier to understand. The debtor can always say, you know what, I'm forgiving your debt. For example, if somebody owed you $100, they said, hey, I got sick, my paycheck was a little short, I need $100, but I'm going to work twice as hard because I'm healthy again, and I'm going to give you your $100 back. But they never were able to do it for whatever reason. You as a debtor can say, you know what, I forgive your $100 debt. That's what God can do. God was forgiving the debt of sin, and in some strange way, which we don't really understand because it's a mystery, the Passion was the way to forgive that debt, and not in a way to punish Jesus, who was sinless, stainless. He was God. It wasn't a punishment. It was an action that our blessed Lord had to take to forgive the debt, like going to the bank and saying, hey, I'm going bankrupt, I want my debt forgiven, you have to fill out paperwork. Basically, that's what Jesus was doing. And if it helps you understand a little bit better. And that is one of the most confusing parts that a lot of people get kind of tripped up on with, like, why did Jesus have to suffer and die? Well, he didn't have to do it that way, but that was the way that God wanted to do it. And I mean, hey, he knows more than we do, right? Moving on. Christ is risen from the dead by the glory of the Father, so we also may walk in newness of life. Another great quote from Romans chapter 6, verse 4. And St. Paul is basically explaining how we will be able to enter into heaven. We will be able to be holier people because Jesus is going to give us grace. Like, after he died and rose from the dead, not only did he resurrect and show us that we will be able to rise again, he also gave us the Eucharist. You know, he gave us communion, priests, and all these things right before he died at the Last Supper. And after he rose again, before he ascended into heaven, he gave the apostles the power over heaven and hell. He gave Peter the keys to the kingdom. All these things he gave to us as blessings and grace to help us get to our final destination, which is heaven if we follow his commands. Next quote we have is from St. Thomas Aquinas, again, Summa Theologica, which is a great book to read. It's immensely dense. I mean, if you were to buy it in print, it would be multiple volumes, like 5 or 6 volumes. I don't even know. It is a tome, but it has, if you go on the internet and just search a particular topic, it has great insights into all kinds of spiritual topics about the faith and our beliefs. Now, it was meant to be a introductory course in the 1300s when he wrote it. I believe it was the 1300s, but I have to look that up. But now we look at it and we're like, this is so dense. This is too much to understand. It's so funny because it was supposed to be an introductory course when it came out. And I'm looking at it like, whoa, this is crazy. So he said, since through seeing Christ, who is our head, rise again, we hope that we likewise shall rise again. And just a theme of Easter, that Jesus rose, so we'll rise. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Next quote again is from St. Thomas Aquinas. Our belief in Christ's Godhead is confirmed by his rising again. If Christ didn't rise, then there is no Christianity. We have no reason to believe. It was the final and most authoritative miracle that Jesus used his own power to rise himself. And by his rising, he shows us that we will rise as well if we follow him and carry our cross and stay faithful. So it's really the resurrection that if you really want to defend the faith to someone, they might say, well, what about the Old Testament this, or what about that, or what about this or that? And you could say, at the end of the day, what's really important is, did Jesus rise from the dead by his own power or not? And we have lots of good historical evidence that he did, not only from the apostles who wrote pretty much immediately after it happened, which never happens in the ancient world. Like, even our histories of Julius Caesar and some of the other people who, ruled the world, Napoleon, like a lot of these histories were written 100 years, 200 years after the fact. So what we're getting with Jesus is people who have firsthand knowledge and who are writing pretty much immediately. It's unheard of. They're writing a history of the person, a biography of things that happened pretty much immediately after they happened. That hardly ever happened in the ancient world. So we have very good historical evidence, not only from the apostles, but also from Jewish sources. We have Roman sources, official letters written back and forth to people in the Roman government. And there is a great book called Hostile Witnesses that you can get online, and it talks all about how the people who are against the faith have backed up the evidence claims that we have, because they have no reason to say, hey, these people believe that Jesus rose, and there's all these people that they have all the reason to lie about it. But the people who are against the faith give the best proof for the faith when they are saying the same exact things about it. But the book Hostile Witnesses explains way better than I can. So, and this is the last quote, number 10, from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verse 46. Thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise again from the dead the third day. And I really like this quote because it is just saying how it was preordained. That's the way God wanted to do it, and that it is fitting. It was necessary because God wanted it that way, and he knows way more than we know. And that's one of the things that people get tripped up on with the problem of evil. Oh, why Jesus have to suffer? Why is there evil in the world? Why did Adam and Eve, were they allowed to sin? Or why were the angels given a choice to sin? One, because you can't really love without free will, without a free choice. And two, because God knows, he knows everything. He knows way more. I mean, I can't even say way more. It doesn't even make sense how much more God knows than we know. Every possible situation, every possible outcome, every infinite anything. He knows it. And it can't be infinite because God is infinite, but he made a finite creation. So it's finite, so it's smaller than him, so he can absolutely understand everything that has the potential of happening and make good out of it, because God is all good, but that he allows bad things to happen because he can make a good thing happen out of it, because he knows more than we do. For example, you have a parent says, don't go over there, that side of the playground or whatever. And the parent says that because they can't see the kid on that side of the playground. All the kid knows is, you're messing up my playtime. You're making things less fun because you don't want me to go over there. But the parent knows that if you go over there, the street is closer to there. There's lots of people who are walking by. I can't see everything that's going on. What seems like the kid a bad thing, I can't play over there, which looks like a lot of fun, because they can't see the whole picture. The parent knows what might be bad for you right now, I'm bringing good out of it. So that's why I really like this quote from the Gospel of Luke. Thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise again from the dead the third day. Why? Because God knows what's best for us. Even though we can't see it, he can see it. And if we follow him, we will, we'll get our reward and we'll benefit from that. So that's the end of the top 10 quotes, Easter edition. Thanks for checking me out. God bless. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. Find more great quotes at sdcason.com. And I'm gonna try to put up like a top 10 list of quotes on different topics, maybe like once a week. But on the website right now, there's about 300 different quotes, and you can just go by category through them, or you could search a particular topic with a search box, or you could just browse through. There's lots of great quotes over there. Each of them have their source, so you'll know they're legitimate quotes. And hey, that's it. Until next time, stay holy.